What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. We are back on our Arc 3.0 Hunter, going over a Blight Ranger Exotic Helmet build that gives our allies basically infinite orbs when you're blocking all the damage, similar to Ursa Furiosa on the Titan. Now, to start off with this build, mainly going to be around the Arc Staff Super, tanking all of the damage in our endgame activities. We're going to be using Marksman Dodge with Triple Jump, as well as Disorienting Blow, so when we strike enemies, we blind them and we become amplified with Pulse Grenades, in my opinion, best for the Hunter in PvE. Now, for our two aspects that we're going to be using is Flow State, so defeating jolted targets makes us amplified. While we're amplified, our dodge recharges more quickly, which is important because we're using a lethal current, so after we dodge, our next melee has increased range, jolts the target, and damaging aftershock, so it just kind of perpetually feeds back into itself. And Flow State plus Disorienting Blow, we have that blinding for endgame, makes it super nice on some of those bigger, stronger enemies like champions. Now, for our fragments that we got going on down here, we have Spark of Resistance, so while we're surrounded, you are more resistant to incoming damage. This helps with the strength as well because of using this Disorienting Blow and that dodge very consistently in this build. We're also using Spark of Shock, so our Arc Grenades jolt targets, which just helps over here with defeating those jolt targets, helps us become amplified and keeps that going for us. We're also using Spark of Amplitude, so defeating targets while we're amplified helps create orbs of power. This right here is going to help us get back our super faster, which in turn will help our allies get back their super because we can pop ours more often and tank all of that damage. Last but not least, for our aspects here, we're going to go with Spark of Feedback, so taking melee damage briefly increases outgoing melee damage. We're using this for the resistance, plus what I talked about in Lethal Current, Flow State, dodging, and using Disorienting Blow with this build. Super nice for that end game because blinding is super clutch, like I said, on some of those stronger enemies. Now, moving on to the weapons here, our heavy and our kinetic are going to stay the same, where we can rotate our energy weapons for the different burns as well as some of the different champions. So we're going to be using Deliverance first with Demolitionist Chill Clip, so we can stop again, another way of stopping those champions with the Chill Clip, hitting double body shots. They'll freeze for a second, then we can throw on Disorienting Blow and blind them as well. Now, for the weapons in our energy slot that I'm switching it up, we're going to have a Void Scout Rifle and a Void Pulse Rifle, and then also a Solar Pulse Rifle and a Solar Scout Rifle, just to deal with those other burns because we're using an Arc Super as well as Thunderlord, and Thunderlord intrinsically has the Overload champions, so our Scout Rifle is going to deal with the Barrier champions, and then our Pulse Rifles here are going to deal with the Unstoppables, which we can just change up on our arms, because they both have that one energy between a pulse and a scout, switching it up. Now, moving on here to the Blight Ranger helmet, which this build is built around. We're using that Voltaic Mirror, so attacks you redirect with your Arc Staff deal massively increased damage. Not using that as much as we're using it generates orbs of power for our allies. So guarding with that Whirlwind Guard also does not consume extra super energy, so we can stand there for quite a bit of time, just tanking the damage and letting our allies get plethora of orbs so they can repop their super, and it's just that infinite super chain that you can have with you and your allies. Now, for mods that we're throwing on this bad boy, we're going to be using Protective Light, so when we become charged with light, we're going to have that nice extra oomph on the defense side right here. When we get critically wounded, we lose one stack of charge with light, but this helps us stay alive very easily in that endgame activities, as well as we're using Machine Gun Finder as well as Fusion Finder for our Deliverance and our Thunderlord. Moving on to our arms right here, we're going to have Scout Rifle Loader with Anti-Barrier Scout, and both of those you can also switch out for Pulse Loader and the Unstoppable Pulse mod, they both take up the same amount of energy. We're also throwing Font of Wisdom on, so picking up those Arc Elemental Wells grants us temporary increase to our intellect, just cranking this 54 all the way up to 100 for a nice chunk of time, allowing us to pop our Arc Staff more often. Now on our chest piece right here, we're going with solar and arc damage resistance as well as concussive dampener, just a way for us to stay alive as a hunter, the more squishy of the subclasses, and both solar, arc, and concussive are going to help with that. Now we're using melee well maker, so those powered melee combatant final blows spawn those arc elemental wells for us, which just tie back into lethal current in our disorienting blow melee, dodging and getting all of that back super fast. We're able to create a decent amount of those arc elemental wells, which will help us proc Font of Wisdom, and that's also how we're going to become charged with light based on elemental charge on our boots here. Picking up elemental wells gives us that charge with light stacking up to ×2, which will help us continuously have protective light as well. On top of that, we're using Machine Gun Scav for our Thunderlord, as well as Absolution, so it reduces all of our ability cooldowns each time we pick up an Orb of Power, which we're creating those because we're going to be amplified, and we get those consistent defeats well amplified, help us create Orbs of Power, so it's a nice way to get our abilities back, again chaining that disorienting blow, giving us that melee well maker and our arc elemental wells. Finally, on our class item here, we're going to have Outreach, so reduces melee cooldown when we dodge, just another positive feedback loop there with amped up, so we stay amplified longer, again helping us create more Orbs of Power based on our fragments that we have, and amped up is super easy to get, so the longer we have it, the more we can use this build and utilize it to its full potential with powerful friends, so every time we become charged with light, nearby allies also become charged with light if they are already not, so it's a nice way to spread the love with our fellow guardians in that endgame activity, like the master catch keep we have here. Being able to block with our Blight Ranger gives so many orbs, and we can stay alive pretty consistently with this build unless everything in the map is shooting at us. But when you're taking this into endgame activities like Nightfalls, Grandmasters, even in raids when you're tanking damage, you can use this to create so many orbs for your fellow allies, especially in those GMs. It's a very nice way to create orbs for like your Arc Titans, so they can continuously pop Thunder Crash, or something like your Solar Warlock, so you can always have that well up for that survivability in endgame activities. This build super user friendly as well, and very helpful for your fire team. Definitely more of a support class than doing crazy DPS or anything like that. This we're using to stun all of our different champions, deal with all of our different shields just by switching out our energy weapon from those pulses to our scouts, dealing with those champions, and then we're just creating orbs upon orbs upon orbs for our allies, allowing us to chain infinite supers back and forth between our allies. So y'all definitely can check out this build, try to get that Blight Ranger helmet from doing Lost Sectors. That's where they come from. Once you get it, it can drop from a world drop, but I've only gotten a few of these. So once you get a good one, definitely save that bad boy, make this build out right here, and take it into endgame and be that support hunter that we know hunters can be. So thank you guys so much again for watching. Truly appreciate it. Appreciate that support. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.